question is, amending the MDP requires benefit to the community as a whole. And just to expand on that, the town adopted the municipal development plan in 2016 after extensive consultation. Ian talked about that with the town. And it's meant to be the master planning document. It lays out generally, this should be a residential area, this should be a commercial area. We have some resort areas. We have Three Sisters as a resort, Silvertip is a resort, Spring Creek calls itself a resort. We have commercial areas, we have areas for recreation and so on. So we've gone back and taken a look, and within the MDP, it talks about change being benefit to the community as a whole. So we went and looked at all of the amendments that have taken place in the MDP from adoption in 2016. And there are some that I think all of them qualify, and it's easy to understand. Is it of a benefit to the community as a whole that we amend the MDP to permit a hospice? And hospice is something that works for Canmore as a whole, and so the amendment, the MDP to that makes sense. But the question you then have to ask is, will Canmore as a whole be better off if there's another hotel or spa? And not just any hotel and spa. Will Canmore be better off as a whole if we have a hotel and spa in this green space location? We've spoken with town administration, and they have, as we understand it, they look at 3 criteria when they're assessing this kind of an issue. They look at economic, social, and environmental issues. So from an economic perspective, would Canmore as a whole be better off if we had a hotel and spa? I guess the tax base goes up, and that's good. What's unique that requires that hotel and spa to be in this green space? There's nothing that drives that. And in fact, this location is probably more expensive for town services as we go on. For social benefits, it's the same thing. There's really nothing that compels this location other than for the developer, it's a potentially more profitable location than being somewhere else in the community. As to environmental issues, well, Diana has taken us through the wildlife and the environmental issues and the negative implications of that. Carl has spoken about the risks that we're dealing with. It's pretty hard to think that there's something environmentally beneficial to the town as a whole from building a hotel and spa on this location. So, Bob, thank you for the question. The developer, as we know, has been doing all the drilling and disrupting of the land. Presumably they have to take the results of the surveying that they've done, and Carl has pointed out the limitations of the results of engineering. When you take a look at, a bit of an aside, but when you take a look at the engineering reports that have been provided for some of the Three Sisters lands, the engineers say, yes, you can do this, this, and that. And then at the back, there's a section called limitations. And the engineering report goes on sometimes for 8 pages saying of all the things that this report doesn't cover. So Carl gave you the example of a 40 by 40 grid. The engineers will tell you what's in each of those 4 drill holes, and they assume and don't take any liability for the 1,600 meters in between. Sorry, I'm rambling and I'm getting lost. Timing. So the developer has to decide that with engineers that this is something that's doable, and for their purposes that it's economic. If it's uneconomic, then presumably they abandon the quest. If there's an economic way of remediating, then armed with that, the developer needs a structural engineer or team of structural engineers to figure out how to do that in a way that for the developer is cost effective and for the town's purpose is effective and efficient. That, together with a myriad of reports like wildlife and transportation, fire safety, etc., all have to be gathered and submitted. That's a big project. These are big developers. They have money to do these things. So the simple answer with a long, simple answer is no, we don't know. We would anticipate it's in the next few months. As Ian pointed out, the lease from the province requires the developer to obtain a development permit from the town of Canmore within 3 years of the issuance of the lease. The lease was issued in early April 2024, so that's another 13 or 14 months. We believe that it's not in the interest of the province to extend that, and we're having conversation with the province about that. So I think the developer has to get moving sooner rather than later, but I don't know.
Thank you.
Please.
Has water usage been addressed?
The question is, has water usage been addressed? And our understanding is that the site would be serviced with water and other town services through the municipal system. Whether there's adequate water is, I believe, a question that the town has to look at when it's assessing the development, but it's not something that we have enough information or knowledge to know. And sorry, just if I may, I was trying to think earlier about what issues were we not covering in our conversations and presentation, and one that I think is helpful to know or to raise. And the question is the development, as we last saw it, presented in December of 2024, included the hotels, the spa, parking, and staff housing. So the question would be, might staff housing be an inducement for town council to provide approval? We don't know. I have to tell you, in my view, I think town council's too smart. I think they're smart enough to see through that. Staff employee housing is really a zero-sum game. You create a large hotel and a large Nordic spa, and you need a whole bunch of employees. If you didn't have this new business, you wouldn't need the employees, and you wouldn't have to worry about where they're going to be housed. Once you need all these employees, the net amount of residual or extra staff accommodation that's going to be built is pretty minimal. It's a zero-sum game. And, as we've said in all these other arguments, there's nothing compelling about providing staff housing in this green space. Staff housing could be elsewhere. In fact, this is a really poor location. You're going to have a whole bunch of young people. You're going to trap them. It's night. They're off work. There's no other commercial activity. There's nothing else that's going on. There's no bus service. So there's either going to be an awful lot of traffic or an awful lot of noise or both. And the other piece in this is we have to remember that staff housing, employee housing, is not social housing. If a developer puts up staff housing, they're going to charge the staff who stay there whatever the commercial rate is for that accommodation. It might be 4 to a room, and it might be less money, but it's going to be it's a commercial transaction. It does nothing to alleviate Canmore's housing issues. None of it's going to be at below market rate, and it does nothing to help the young families in this valley. The question is, if the town couldn't stop Three Sisters, why do we think that we can have success? The 1992 Natural Resources Conservation Board decision, which said Three Sisters could go ahead, and which led to all sorts of ramifications around the development of the Three Sisters area, has no application to this land. The 92 decision led to Three Sisters bifurcating its land, so Wind Valley got cut off and couldn't be developed, and the rest could. The province, eager for commercial development in this valley, because we're just coming out of the coal mining days, said, we, as a province, will take on the liability for undermining in the Three Sisters area, and that will stimulate development and let it happen. So in return for Three Sisters getting the province to step up, because the town of Canmore said, we want nothing to do with liability, and good for the town of Canmore to do that, the Three Sisters gave up Wind Valley. These developers are now asking the province to take on liability to bring their land under this Canmore undermining review regulation without providing any compensation. So we, the province, we, the taxpayers of the province, are going to take on risk for absolutely no return that comes from it. The town, when the Three Sisters development, the last ASP went to the town council said, no, we don't approve that, go back to where you were. Three Sisters appealed to a board that the province has established for these things, and the board said, town council, you didn't have the ability to do that because what the province decided in 1992 stands. So the legal structure is completely different. These are lands that are inside the town boundary that are not affected by the 1992 NRCB hearing. They're not covered by the Canmore undermining review regulation and the other things that flow from it. So this is something that's going to come to town council, and town council is going to have to make a decision. Do we protect green space or don't we? Thank you. The information that's being added is that the Three Sisters issue is not over. BVE, Bow Valley Engage, are appealing a last court decision and saying it's wrong if you're going to go back to the 1992 NRCB decision, then you first must update the environmental impact study, which we would all support, wherever you are on any of these issues. Why would we not want to have an environmental impact study to understand what's going on in the valley today?